Governance is like Google Maps. It sets the destination, it gives you options, and warns you about traffic. But here's the thing, Google Maps does not actually drive the car. That's management. If you confuse the two, you will end up in the wrong place. Hi, I'm Laura. I work in IT security and I passed the CISM after years away from formal studying. And honestly, I struggled too. But once I broke these concepts down into plain English with real life stories, it finally clicked. And that's exactly what I will do for you here. This video is your shortcut to domain 1 of the CISM exam by ISACA. We will cover what governance actually means, how it differs from management, the key roles and cultures, the legal side, and the strategy. And I will test you along the way. If you can answer the recap questions at the end, you are ready for domain 1. And if not, don't stress. I will give you a free cheat sheet with all the exam keywords you need to know for the exam. You will find a link down in the description, along with my other resources like the full study guide with the CISM, with all the domains explained in plain English, just like I do here, AI study prompts you can use to get exam ready, and my favorite exam study planner, all in one place on my beacons page. So stay with me until the end and let's dive in. This is your CISM session with Laura, and let's make security more simple. All right, let's start at the beginning. What exactly is governance? How is it different from management? And why does it matter so much? Not just for the exam, but in real security programs. Because if you mix those up, your strategy will collapse before you even begin. Domain 1 is 70% of your score, roughly 26 questions. Treat it as your compass. If you get governance right, the rest of CISM gets easier. So, what exactly do we mean by governance? Governance, according to COVID, is holistic. It adapts to changes in the environment, distinguishes itself clearly from management, and always covers the enterprise end to end. The purpose is to ensure that information security strategy is aligned with the organizational goals. Think of COVID as the blueprint that keeps security tied to the business, end to end. And aligning with goals means protecting the business. The goal of information security is to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information, or CIA, but also authenticity and non-repudiation. In plain English, information must be protected, trusted, and available when decisions need to be made. If the data isn't authentic or deniable, decisions fail. Keep that in mind when you see which control best type of questions. And that requires governance at the core. Effective governance means security aligns with business goals, provides directions, ensures objectives are met, sets the risk management approach, and makes efficient use of resources. In practice, this means your security roadmap mirrors the business roadmap. If budgets, metrics, and risks don't point in the same direction, governance is missing. And please don't confuse governance with management. ISACA tests this difference quite often. Governance is doing the right thing, setting the direction. Management is doing the thing right by executing. Here's your memory hook. Who decides the what and the why? Governance. Who runs the how and the when? That's management. Keep those verbs straight on exam day. At work, governance is like my manager telling us where we are going. But management is me actually booking the flights and getting us there. Now let's test. Who is accountable for information security governance? Now, quick test. Governance is all about accountability. So, who is ultimately responsible for making sure security aligns with the organizational strategy? And the answer is C, board of directors, because in governance, accountability always rests at the top, not the CIO, not the CISO, and not audit. So let's talk now about why governance is important and what outcomes it delivers. All right. So now that we know what governance is, what does it actually deliver? ISACA calls this the outcomes of governance. And here's the surprising fact. More than 80% of breaches are linked to weak security governance and culture, not to elite hackers or fancy attacks. If you get the outcomes right, you stop most problems before they even hit the firewall. And here's the exam trick. Once that you understand the outcomes, the questions stop looking tricky and start looking predictable. Governance aligns information security with business goals, builds assurance for management, and provides measurable results. In short, it provides security in enabling the business, not blocking it. Let's see why information security governance matters. Businesses depend on information assets. Cybercrime is increasing globally. Most failures start with weak culture or priorities, not ninja hackers. Governance turns random defenses into a system that is too annoying and too expensive to attack. And it also ensures compliance with regulations, which bring us to the 5 specific outcomes you must know. The outcomes are strategic alignment, value delivery, risk management, resource optimization, performance measurement, and assurance integration. Try to remember the category, not the bullet. So, alignment, value, risk, resources, measurement. If an answer smells like one of those themes, you are close. They appear in the exam questions quite often. And when these outcomes are in place, this is what effective information security looks like. Effective information security supports business objectives, uses resources wisely, keeps risk at an acceptable level, and provides measurable metrics. It evolves with the organization, not separately from it. If your metrics don't provide business value and acceptable risk, they are vanity numbers. Governance demands relevance, and assurance functions fit this into this governance. Audit provides independent oversight. Compliance ensures laws and regulations are respected. Risk management brings enterprise level risk input. Together, they create transparency and accountability. Now, let's check your understanding with a governance scenario. Here's a governance trap ISACA loves. The CISO has a long risk register. Instead of showing everything to the steerco, he decides some treatments himself. Is that okay? The answer is not correct. The CISO can't decide alone. Risks must go to the steering committee for governance oversight. That is their job. Now, let's move into the next block, into culture and structure. Governance is not just about frameworks and policies. It lives in the culture of the company and in how roles and responsibilities are set. If the culture is weak or if the reporting lines are wrong, governance fails. And sometimes it's not even malicious. Maybe the CISO is accountable, the security manager is responsible, and your poor intern is just confused. Culture is built on values, norms, and leadership tone. A strong security culture is transparent and reinforced by continuous awareness and communication. I once worked with a team who kept buying their own SaaS tools. At first, I thought it was rebellion, but it was really a governance failure. If security and IT says no too much, without alternatives, people would just go around it. So fix culture and processes, not just the policy text. And at the end of the day, accountability always rests with the top. The board and executive management are accountable for information security. A sign of good governance is when the CISO has visibility at the C-suite level or board level, but the organizational structure also plays a key role. A strong structure defines roles, ensures independence, and positions information security high enough in the hierarchy to be effective. Independence is not ego, it's conflict of interest hygiene. Security needs enough altitude to challenge delivery teams. And this is why the reporting line of the CISO is so important. The best practice is that the CISO reports to the CEO or the board. If the CISO reports to the CIO, that's a conflict of interest because the CIO is responsible for delivery while the CISO is there to challenge and protect. This one for me was difficult to grasp and understand because it is not what you typically see in practice. A lot of companies follow this old model, and we have a lot of discussion about this during boot camps. So watch out. But beyond the reporting lines, governance uses the RACI model to clarify roles. RACI clarifies responsibility. Responsible equals who does the work. Accountable owns the decision. Consulted gives input. And informed is to be kept outdated. Your exam clue is that there can be many responsible, but only one accountable. If two A's appear, it's a trap. So how does this apply in information security roles? Match the verbs to the roles. Board approves direction. Executive management funds and supports it. Asset owners approve access. Custodians implement controls. An information security manager develop strategy and communicates it. And don't forget the roles of privacy and compliance as they round out the picture. The Chief Privacy Officer, or CPO, ensures compliance with privacy laws like GDPR. The Chief Compliance Officer, or CCO, manages regulatory and ethics programs. Different lenses, same accountability chain. Now, let's test your understanding of security culture. Culture can make or break governance. Out of these four options, which one really builds a strong information security culture? And the correct answer is A, executive management demonstrating visible support. The tone at the top is what drives culture. Policies, password, or decentralization don't create culture on their own. Now, let's move to the next part onto legal and ethics. Okay, so far we have looked inside the company, but governance is also shaped from the outside by laws, regulations, and ethics. This is where ISACA loves to sneak in exam traps. For example, privacy laws like GDPR, intellectual property protections, or local regulations that you can't ignore. But don't worry, I will show you the shortcut to keep them straight. Examples like privacy laws like GDPR, intellectual property protections, and local or regional regulations. Governance ensures that these are compliant with, because non-compliance is a risk. Laws defines the minimum, and governance decide how far above that the business needs to be. These laws are one side of compliance, but governance also has to look at the records themselves. What needs to be protected, how long it must be kept, and how it can be retrieved for audits or investigations. That's where content and retention requirements come in. When it comes to content and retention, the information security manager does not act alone. They work with legal. Together, they identify the types of records that must be protected to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They also determine the underlying legal and regulatory requirements and agree on a strategy for locating and retrieving information if it's even needed for law enforcement or legal investigations. The key point for the exam is that governance requires collaboration between information security and legal, not one acting in isolation. Now, let's see how retention requirements play out in practice, because business rules can be stricter than the law. Regulation sets the minimum retention requirement, but business policy can go further. For example, if the law says record must be kept for 8 years, the business may decide to keep it then for 10. Policies must always meet the legal requirements, but may extend them for operational or strategic reasons, but not forever. Retention without disposal is a breach waiting to happen. And remember, regulatory compliance should be treated like any other risk. The extent of compliance is ultimately a business decision made by senior management. But governance is not just about rules on paper. It's also about how people behave. And that's where acceptable use and ethics set the tone. Acceptable use policies set clear expectations for employees, but policies only work when leadership enforces them. Ethics, not just compliance, build a strong culture of trust. Now, here's a quick question on retention. Let's test your knowledge of legal requirements. A California company loses an encrypted laptop that contains HR data. What does the law require in this case? The answer is D. No reporting obligations if the data is encrypted. Encryption equals safe harbor under California law. If the data is protected, there's no need to notify. Now let's zoom out to the next block onto strategy. All right, now it's time to zoom out to the big picture. Governance defines the strategy, the roadmap from today to tomorrow. This is one of my favorite parts because when you get this right, everything else falls into place. Strategy is where governance stops being theory and starts shaping real budgets, projects, and priorities. A strategy defines how to move from current to desired state using people, processes, and technology. It's a story how you move from now to next. It is just not buying tools, it is alignment with the business. Now, let's put names to each layer. Objectives define wins. Strategy chooses how to win, and the plans schedule the work. Expect change, update the plan, but not the vision. So, how do we actually build this roadmap? Step 1, assess the current state. Step 2, define the desired state. Step 3, identify the gaps. And step 4, build the roadmap. This sequence is exam gold. If an option list is 4 in order, it is probably correct. And strategy must be tied to business assets. Information assets have value. Business processes determine their criticality. Risk assessments highlight priorities. The strategy must always reflect this business context, and policies anchor it all. Here's a quick decoder. Policy equals what? Standard, how much? Procedure, how? And guideline is advice. Policies set the directions, procedures are daily instructions, and standards make it measurable. Don't swap them on the exam. Now, let's focus on the big picture model. BMIS is the business model for information security. It is ISACA's holistic framework with 4 interdependent elements: organization and strategy, people, processes, and technology. BMIS says nothing changes alone. Change one and the other change too. Touch the process and people move. Tweak the technology and the strategy will shift. And to measure governance in practice, ISACA uses the balanced scorecard. The balanced scorecard is a way to measure if your security strategy is working. It connects big picture goals to measurable outcomes. It looks at 4 perspectives: financial value, customer or stakeholder satisfaction, internal processes, and learning or growth. In other words, Are we delivering value? Are we aligned? And are we improving? That's what the balanced scorecard tells governance. And that brings us to the metrics themselves. So the key KPIs, key goal indicators, tell you if the goal was achieved. The KPIs, key performance indicators, measure how well we are performing. And the key RIs, key risk indicators, highlight where risks are increasing. They must be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And here's the mistake that I have seen in practice: dashboards with 200 numbers that nobody understands. More is not better. Governance metrics should focus on what matters to the business. Now, let's go for a quick strategy quiz. Strategy is not about buying tools or building giant dashboards. Which of these actions best shows effective strategy development? And the correct answer is B. Strategy is about aligning with business goals through a structured process, not throwing technology or metrics at the problem. Now let's go into the next block: strategic planning and support. Strategy on paper looks great, but in practice, it only works if people, training, and support are in place. This part is about making strategy real through planning, awareness, and avoiding the classic pitfalls that ISACA loves to test. Governance ensures that skills are identified, gaps are filled, and people are trained. Security is everyone's job, not just IT. And awareness is part of that system. Awareness training reinforces culture for all employees. Continuous education keeps professionals sharp. People are often the weakest link. Awareness reduces that risk. Just think about it. In most large organizations, there's a code of conduct or annual security training that you have to complete. The point is not just to click through, tick the box, and hit accept. Good governance means that training is interactive, relevant, and actually changes the behavior. That is the difference between compliance on paper and real awareness in practice. But awareness will mean very little without management support. Senior management secures resources, sets the tone, and endorses security culture. Without their buy in, governance collapses. In other words, no sponsorship, no program. Bring business cases, not tool catalogs. And even with good support, pitfalls can derail strategy. Watch out for biases. Overconfidence. We are secure. Optimism. It won't happen here. Status quo. We have always done it this way. Groupthink. Just agreeing too fast. And herding. Following the trends blindly. Governance must challenge this. And governance can be structured differently depending on the organization. Centralized governance means consistency but slower decisions. And decentralized means flexibility but inconsistency. The right balance depends on the culture and the size. Now, let's wrap up with a recap and some practice questions. Now, once that you have a strategy, what is the most critical factor to make sure that it actually works long term? The answer is B. Without executive buy in, even the best training, bias monitoring, or structures will collapse. The tone at the top drives everything. And this was all for domain one. Now, this is time for a quick recap. We have covered a lot. Now, the real question is, are you actually ready for domain one? Let's test you with some self-check questions, and then I will show you how these keywords appear on the exam. Let's see if you are ready for domain one. These are the kind of questions that ISACA loves to test: accountability, governance versus management, culture, frameworks. So take a moment to look at the list on the screen and challenge yourself. If you can answer this without second guessing, you are exam ready. These are the hot buttons ISACA keeps circling back to. If you know these keywords, you will spot exam traps instantly. Take a moment to scan a list on the screen. Think about how you would explain each one in plain English and taste the real test. Not memorizing, but being able to use them in context. And that is domain one governance. If you followed along and nailed the recap, you are ready for this part of the exam. And remember, understanding beats memorizing. That's how I passed, and that's how you will too. If you want my free governance cheat sheet, check the link in the description below. And while you're there, also grab my other resources on my Beacons page, the full CISM guides, AI study prompts, and my week-by-week exam schedule. Now I want to hear from you. What is your CISM journey? Did you get the quiz answers right? And which domain one concepts do you find the trickiest? And of course, subscribe now because domain 2 on risk management is coming up next and you don't want to miss it. I am Laura. This was your CISM session. And remember, let's keep security simple.